My name is Nancy Brandy Cutler, and my family moved up to Lake Tahoe in 1951, and I graduated high school there in 1964. So I spent all of my growing up years in South Lake Tahoe. In the winter of 1951-52, my parents had followed through with a dream of theirs to live at South Lake Tahoe, and they had an opportunity to lease the Vikingsholm castle from the owner, Harvey West, who was a lumberman in Placerville. And they decided to make a destination membership resort out of Vikingsholm. And they were able to start doing that in the summer of 1951. And they rented out rooms in the castle and in the cabins around. When we first moved up there, I remember that there was another caretaker family that was living in the caretaker's part of the castle, because to heat the entire castle over the winter would have been impossible. I have written a little article. Winter at Lake Tahoe suggests the question, how much snow will we get this year? For those of us who, in this century, the old timers, the comparison is usually with the last really big winter in recent memory, the winter of 1951-52. It was a winter that lasted longer, brought more snow, blocked more roads, and possibly caused more hardship on the permanent residents of South Lake Tahoe than even the oldest among them can remember. I don't know how many inches of snow were actually recorded in the valley, but I recall that we had a printed board around our home for very many years that said 356 inches, which is what my dad had recorded at the Vikingsholm Castle when we spent that notable winter there. The book that my parents wrote after that experience is called High in the Sierra, 1952, and recounts the story of our young family of 5 being snowed in for 7 months, November 1951 to May of 1952, while living in the caretaker's apartment in the castle. The Vikingsholm Castle in 1951 was previously privately owned by Harvey West. My parents, Flip and Polly Brandy, decided to make a destination resort of the property. We only lived there for 1 year because that was the year we were snowed in. I remember my parents giving tours of the interior of the castle to visitors, and we kids would follow along on those tours. They were very impressed with carpet in the library and also the 6-legged piano. And I was very impressed with Selma, the clock. And I remember sitting and talking to her and telling her my secrets. They had of chinchillas that they had through the winter. And they lost, I think, 5 of them that winter to various things, but not to the cold, because chinchillas like cold. So you'll find out in the book, but they did have some heavy equipment. They had an old Army half-track that thought they might be able to keep the road plowed with, but that didn't work. So, but the road around Emerald Bay has not been plowed in, I don't know, 100 years or something.
No, like they close it every winter. So I can't even believe what that would be like. And so how did you get food?
Well, they knew that they might be snowed in for short periods of time, hopefully short periods of time. So they did think about that, and they made several trips to Reno to warehouses, and they bought a lot of canned things. I remember eating Spam, and when we ran out of fresh milk, my mother diluted evaporated milk, and none of the 3 of us would drink it, and so until she put chocolate in it. And then, of course, we loved it because it's pretty rich. My sister and I would never drink milk after, and they had a speedboat. When the road was closed, they could always take the speedboat across the bay and go to South Tahoe, and he would tie the boat up at the Pope Estate, and then he had his car parked there. And the thought was they could go into the valley to get supplies and mail. However, when the Continental highways were closed, there were very few supplies, so they were not able to get very much in the way of fresh milk and eggs. But then in January, the bay froze over, and so they couldn't even get the boat out. And so we lived from January to May truly snowbound. Can you imagine 3 very young children, 2, 4, and 6, up in an apartment? We listened to the radio a lot. We didn't have TV, but we listened to our special shows on the radio, particularly I remember Saturdays listening to the radio and certain soap operas, Gildersleeve, and my parents spent a fair amount of time outside shoveling, keeping the snow off the roofs and away from the windows. And then when the ice started to soften, they tried to chop some of the ice so that they might be able to get the boat out. It kept coming. It kept coming and coming and coming, the snow. My parents really enjoyed being there. As I said, living at Tahoe was their dream. And I don't know that they ever had second thoughts or wanting to leave, but they were worried about where they were going to put all the snow, because when you shovel it off the roofs and you have to shovel up, they were concerned about, how much snow can we endure? There used to be a resort there that kind of like a hotel. During that heavy winter, the owner's name was Mr. Watson, and he would ask my dad how his building was doing. And so my dad would snowshoe over there and check it out. Well, at one point, the roof collapsed. So my dad talks in the book about going over there, and he had stored all the linens and food and everything in that main building. And Dad would go over there and try and pull stuff out and salvage it and put it in a safe place where it wouldn't get ruined from the melting snow. Oh yes, I think they would. They always said that was the happiest time of their life. And then we moved, and this is interesting, kind of a barn-shaped building on Highway 50. And right now that's where Steamer's Bar and Grill is. We lived in that house for 5 years, and they bought the half acre next door to it. My parents were pretty adventuresome. And so a few years later, in 1955, they were talking with community people, somehow decided to buy the Lake Tahoe News. So they bought this newspaper. Neither one of them had ever even been in a newspaper, but they bought it, and they moved all the equipment, lock, stock, and barrel, up over Spooner Summit and to the building. Them moving this on a flatbed truck, an enormous printing press to print the newspapers on. Old-fashioned hand-fed press. Dad would stand up on a platform, and he'd take one sheet at a time and fluff it and then send it through the press to print. Dad had a column called Here and There with Flip that he wrote every week. It was a weekly paper, and I drove around the lake every week delivering piles of newspapers to businesses. Like, I went from first grade with several of my classmates all the way through high school in that same building, the same location. Right. They kept adding parts onto it, and we never got to go to any new schools. 12 years in the same building. My mom also, as part of the Seroptimist, she had a music background, and they were going to have a district Seroptimist convention at Harvey's in 1963. And so she got a group of Seroptimist daughters together and created a chorus called the Seroptones, and we sang at the convention, and we were singing things from Sound of Music. I remember in first grade, we were bused as part of the PE program to Ski Run Boulevard, and I learned to ski with a tow rope before Heavenly Valley was there.